the Jaipur BookMark reflects the core values of the publishing industry, and it brings together some of the greatest publishing professionals from around the world.
जयपुर बुकमार्क एक ऐसा प्लेटफॉर्म है जहाँ पे कि बिजनेस को समझने का एक अपॉर्चुनिटी मिलता है. सो आई थिंक JBM इज़ समथिंग विच इज़ फैंटास्टिक एंड पीपल हु डोंट नो अबाउट इट, उनको आना चाहिए, उनको इसका हिस्सा बनना चाहिए.
Jaipur BookMark. Come and celebrate literature, meet authors, agents, publishers. Join us at the Jaipur BookMark.
On behalf of Jaipur BookMark Festival Advisors, Aditi Maheshwari Goyal, Namita Gokhale, Naveen Kishore, Neeta Gupta and Urvashi Butalia, festival producer Sanjoy Roy, and all my colleagues at Team Book Arts, we welcome you to the 8th edition of the Jaipur BookMark. The Indian publishing industry has grown rapidly with the world's attention converging on it. Creating a meaningful B2B platform for publishers was thus essential, and the Jaipur BookMark was conceived to run parallel to the Jaipur Literature Festival. In the 7 years since its inception, JBM has fast emerged as a nerve center for the South Asian publishing industry and is indeed a focal point where books mean business. In 2020, the world grappled with the pandemic and businesses learned to reinvent themselves and adapt to an entirely new digital idiom. JBM 2021 is being held as a virtual event and, as always, continues to bring together all stakeholders of the business of books over meaningful discussions and far-reaching resolutions. A warm welcome to the inaugural address by His Excellency Ambassador Hans Jacob Frydenlund, Namita Gokhale and Sanjoy Roy at the virtual JBM 2021. We would like to thank our country partner, Royal Norwegian Embassy, for their continued support. His Excellency Hans Jacob Frydenlund is presently Norwegian Ambassador to India. Before coming to India, he was Director for UN Policy in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He has served in Chile, at the Norwegian Mission to the European Union in Brussels, at the Norwegian Mission to the United Nations in New York, and has been the Norwegian representative to the Palestinian Authority. He has worked for 13 years in different capacities with conflict resolution in Africa. He has been press spokesman for international development in the ministry. He was born in 1959, is an economist by education, is married and has 3 grown-up children. Namita Gokhale, an award-winning writer, publisher and festival director. She has written 20 books, including 11 works of fiction. Her recent novel, Jaipur Journals, was released in January 2020. Betrayed by Hope, a play on the tragic life of the poet Michael Madhusudan Dutt, was published in December 2020. A co-founder and co-director of the Jaipur Literature Festival, Namita is keenly involved in curating intra-literary dialogues across languages and cultures. Sanjoy Roy, an entrepreneur of the arts. He is the managing director of Team Book Arts, which produces over 33 highly acclaimed performing arts, visual arts, and literary festivals across 40 cities across the world, including the Jaipur Literature Festival. He is the founder trustee of Salam Balak Trust, providing support services for street and working children in Delhi. Sanjoy works closely with various industry bodies and the government on policy issues in the cultural sector in India. He has lectured and collaborated with international universities. Over to you, Sanjoy.
As many of you know, the Jaipur BookMark is something that we set up some years ago. And again, like most things in our lives, it happened accidentally. In the earlier times, people used to come from across the world and come to Namita or come to me or come to Neeta and said, you know, I've heard that a Polish agent is here or a Swedish publisher is here or a Norwegian delegation is here. Can you introduce me to them? And in the early days when we were small, of course we could. And over the 3 or 5 days, that's what we did. But as we started growing, we realized that by the time we found A person and B person, it was almost impossible. And therefore, from that, the Jaipur BookMark evolved as a place for publishers, for agents, for writers, for everybody in the ecosystem of books and literature coming together to look at opportunities, primarily business opportunities, to look at how we can trade rights, how we can translate our work and bring new writing to the fore. And that's what our entire purpose is. Over the last few years, we've had a wonderful support from our colleagues in Norway. And I'm going to ask the ambassador to tell us why such a small country, so far north, so far away from India, is so interested in being so supportive of literature and, of course, translation. Before that, I'm going to ask the festival co-director, Namita Gokhale, to come and say a few words about the Jaipur BookMark.
Welcome to the 2021 edition of the Jaipur BookMark. We dedicate this series of sessions to all those who believe in books, who stand by books, ideas, and literature. Our sessions, curated by our advisors, Aditi Maheshwari Goyal, Naveen Kishore, Neeta Gupta, and Urvashi Butalia, as well as our partners from Norway, the EU, and our festival editions around the world, explore the post-pandemic learnings of the publishing industry and the book trade. We look at libraries. Libraries are a very important part of the Jaipur Lit Fest experience, and many of our editions internationally are supported by the partner libraries, such as the British Library, or the Doha National Library, or the library in Toronto. And so we look at libraries as hubs of community, of learning, and we explore the evolving narratives of the digital dreamscape. In fact, I have referred to the Jaipur Literature Festival in its virtual edition as almost a living library, or a library of life. We study also the challenges of different and marginalized voices as they struggle, as they succeed in being heard. We observe the changing politics of location and language, which always accompany the passage of books and ideas. Indian publishers from across the diversity of our 21 national languages all share the challenges of the pandemic and their strategies of coping. The essence of JLF is synergies and connectivity, and we are all enriched by the participation, by the support of our partners in the literary world, the cultural world, and the diplomatic world. I look forward to the opening address by Richard Ovenden on the deliberate destruction and the resilient survival of learning and of knowledge systems. We are also honored and delighted to have Juergen of the Frankfurt Book Fair sharing his thoughts and learnings with us on this occasion. We are each other's stories, but who is telling these stories? Who is controlling the algorithm of their narrative? Jaipur BookMark strives to nurture the free flow of ideas so that we can all tell our own stories. We can relay our narratives, listen in, amplify, and resonate as many voices as we can. Thank you again, friends, book lovers around the world, for being a part of our endeavor. I now welcome the Norwegian ambassador, Hans Jacob Frydenlund, to address us with an inaugural speech.
Well, first I have to say, I miss Jaipur. I miss the place, the multitude, and the buzz of the biggest literary show on earth. But I had not imagined that in the ongoing pandemic situation, we will be able to meet in person. I'm not only pleased, but I'm excited that we now are here, and I sincerely hope that when we meet next year in Jaipur, we will gain insights and become wiser from the current situation. We have at least learned some lessons. For many years, we have been debating increased use of technology. Work from home was being explored, Platforms for e-meetings were being created. Audiobooks had started and were picking speed. But COVID-19 forced us to push ahead with digitization in almost all spheres of life overnight. With the series Brave New World, Jaipur Literature Festival has shown the way for how to bring literature out in the digital space. GLF Brave New World has become one of the biggest literature shows in cyberspace. And that is important, because what saved our mental health during the pandemic? The pandemic did not stop neither our need for literature nor our pursuit of it. On the contrary, without the creative fields like art, literature, and books, I don't think we would have survived. Therefore, we should look upon the pandemic year as the year of opportunity, and we should look upon this year as the year of revival. Last year taught us again how to spend time with families, how to enjoy more with less commodities available, how to revive and relive our cultural traditions, be it in form of recipes or literature. What does this point at? It points towards the inherent human craving to keep its roots, to trace them, and to preserve them. And I want to point to one particular aspect in this regard. And that's one of the reasons, one of the questions that was posed by Namita. The need to safeguard our languages. The words that will echo years from now, that we will find mentioned in tales and lores, and especially languages and dialects that do not have a script. When Norway started supporting the Jaipur BookMark for the publishing industry and book industry, when it started to support this initiative 8 years ago, one of our major aims was to present a small language to a big world. That aim remains firm and has been strengthened even further in this unprecedented year, the year of the pandemic. To present the literature of our small language is also an important way to protect it. Because small languages is in danger. Worldwide, every 2 weeks, a language dies. 41% of the different languages in the world, in use around the world today, are endangered. According to a research paper published by the University of Helsinki a few years ago, there are 7,000 languages in the world, and it's possible that only 15% of them will be passed on to the next generation. India has a particular linguistic wealth, but also one that is in danger. According to estimates of the People's Linguistic Survey of India, 600 of the documented 780 languages were dying. The number of dialects spoken as mother tongue in India is over 19,500. Can we imagine how great a loss it will be for our coming generation if the above scenario turns out to be true? How did we manage to create a world where everything that we need for our very survival gets endangered? From the oceans, to clean air, to wildlife, forest, and even the way we communicate, our languages. But why is it important to keep the languages alive? Because languages are repositories of the collective experience that we call culture. When a language dies, we lose a wealth of insight and knowledge with it. For me as a Norwegian, it's enough to think about the more than 300 words our Sami herdsmen, our Sami reindeer herders use for snow. Actually, registered 318 different words. It is important because the first language we learn, our mother tongue, is important to our feelings of roots and identity. Yesterday, we examined the multi-talented and polyglot poet, Michael Madhusudan Dutt, and how he first achieved greatness when he returned to his mother tongue, Bengali. So I'm happy that JLF this year really focuses on 21 different Indian languages. We need to keep languages alive because the mother tongue is the best medium of basic instruction and learning. And that way, I think India's new education policy, with its objective of teaching children in the mother tongue until 5th grade, is an important step for the country. All experiences and research show that starting learning in one's mother tongue is important for both the cognitive development and efficiency of learning. You cannot learn another language properly if you don't know your own language properly. In a world, literary and otherwise, dominated by 20 major languages out of 7,000, it becomes crucial to safeguard the minor ones. Languages that are in minority and languages of the various minority populations around the world. This becomes even more crucial when it comes to languages and dialects that do not have a script. So what can we do to keep the words minor and small languages alive? Well, first, it's an effort on the international level. The 2001 UNESCO Universal Declaration of Cultural Diversity emphasizes in its action plan clearly about 1. Safeguarding the linguistic heritage of humanity and giving support to expression, creation, and dissemination in the greatest possible number of languages. And 2nd, encourage linguistic diversity while respecting the mother tongue at all levels of education, wherever possible, and fostering the learning of several languages from the earliest age. And then its efforts on a national level. And I'll already mentioned the new education policy. But then comes also our cooperation with the BookMark, which is organized by an institution in Norway called Norla, Norwegian Literature Abroad. To help keep our language alive and thriving, we are helping it also be translated and getting out to the world. And also use other examples. We have a minority, the Samis, and what we see now in the world of digitalization is that small languages face problems because they're very easily overridden by the algorithms that was mentioned. So we are developing digital tools that it makes it possible to also use the minority language in the digital media. And in this respect, also there's another connection with India, because there is one of the minority languages, Santali, which actually was codified by Norwegian missionary in the 19th century. And it is now, our Museum of Cultural History is now putting this material, very much of this material online, so it can be used. And then comes for us somehow about the comparison. Santali is a minority language in India, but it's spoken by about 6 million people, which is more than the 5 million Norwegians speaking Norwegian. So it's also about preserving it, and then as we have when it comes to agriculture, we established a seed vault in Svalbard. There's also a seed vault in India. And the National Library of Norway established in 2010 a language bank. It includes both written and oral data to be used for technological development in areas of language and to helping keeping a language alive. While this technology is still costly, I can see that in the future this reaching more languages for lesser costs. We, as I said, translation, and then we had at the international level, we had at national level, But thirdly, none of our national and international initiatives can be successful without initiatives from within the linguistic and the literary community. And that is why platforms such as the Jaipur BookMark are created and need to be nurtured. Translations is one way of keeping a language in use, which also is one of the primary motives behind the establishment of the bookmark. Making literature available in other languages through translation is important to expand our understanding of the world, learn about and better understand each other, and bring us closer together. This is important for cohesion, collaboration, and stability, which are needed now more than ever before. Small languages can support other small languages through translations. Big languages can support small languages through translations. However, for language to survive, it has to be not only preserved and also used directly and indirectly. There is an urgent need that this message is sent across the world, ironically, via the big languages, so it can be heard and sometimes can be done, and we can do something about it. Dear friends, thank you for making me part of this fantastic event, an event that raises our spirits and gives us mental fuel to face the coming year's challenges. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Excellency, Namita and Sanjoy, for your kind and meaningful words. Moving on, now we present to you the keynote address, Burning the Books by Richard Ovenden. Richard Ovenden is Bodley's librarian since 2014. He is also Fellow, Society of Antiquaries and Royal Society of Arts. Member, American Philosophical Society, Treasurer, the Consortium of European Research Libraries, President, the Digital Preservation Coalition. He was awarded the OBE by the Queen in 2019. Over to you, Richard.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's my great pleasure to be addressing the Jaipur BookMark this year, and I'm only sorry that I'm having to do it from my study here in Oxford and not able to be with you in Jaipur. But I'd like to talk to you today about the role of libraries, the role of information, and the preservation of knowledge at a time when knowledge is under attack. And it's been under attack for almost 5,000 years. But I think never has this period been more crucial for society than it is today. So much of society depends on the preservation of knowledge and the circulation of information and the accessibility of those bodies of knowledge for the health of an open society, for the rights of individuals, and for the success of communities. I've written a book called Burning the Books, A History of Knowledge Under Attack, which tries to explain the current situation we're in a long historical context. And I'd like to share that presentation with you today to give you some sense of why libraries, archives, and organized bodies of knowledge are so important, and how we work so closely together with booksellers, with publishers, in an ecosystem that supports our society and our communities. One of the motivations for me writing this book has been rereading George Orwell's 1984. I first read him as a teenager, but having had over 30 years working in libraries and archives, I reread it again with a new light, and he seemed to speak so powerfully to our present moment and the role that knowledge and information plays in an unstable society. And I think if you look at this quote, that libraries and archives, that librarians and archivists are institutions and roles that cling to the truth on behalf of our communities. I've had the benefit of being in a society which has valued libraries as part of our civic infrastructure for almost 200 years. And I grew up in a working class family, and we had few books in our house when I was a child, but I had a public library in a small town in East Kent called Deal. And that library transformed my life. It transformed my opportunities, and is really the reason why I'm lucky enough to be in the position I hold today in Oxford. And this is the institution that I'm responsible for, or at least an engraving of it in the 17th century, the Bodleian Library, which in fact has its origins in the early Middle Ages, with the beginnings of the university itself in the 12th century. And the first university library was formally established more than 700 years ago. Today, it's a network of 27 libraries around the city, ranging in subject from music to medicine, and every topic in between. And as you can imagine, we have historic collections going back to the foundation of the library, and more importantly, its refoundation by Sir Thomas Bodley in the 17th century. But we're also a place where students and researchers come to study. It's a haven outside of an increasingly busy, noisy, and disruptive world, a place where deep thought can be had and new knowledge can be created. But at the heart of our library system are books. Books both in their physical form, which we acquire around the world, hundreds of thousands of new volumes each year, but also in digital form. Increasingly, most of our content that's accessed by our community from the library's collections is done online through e-journals and e-books. But we also have great historic collections of archives, like the archive of J.R.R. Tolkien. Here is his original watercolour drawing for the dust wrapper of the first edition of The Hobbit. And over time, we've acquired an enormous collection, now probably around 17 million volumes, almost 14 million published printed books, and we add to that collection at the rate of 1,000 new books every day. And here we store them in a high density storage facility outside of Oxford, which currently has around 11 million collection items in it. But our collections are now being consulted in different ways. We're using machine learning. We're using scientific investigative techniques like hyperspectral imaging to discover new knowledge about collections that we may have had, like this Selden map of China from the late Ming period for over 400 years. And increasingly, we're using the power of digital technologies to be able to share our collections openly with researchers, students, and members of the public all over the world. As long as you have an internet connection, we're happy to share our riches with you. And the libraries are not just places of collections or places of quiet independent study. They're increasingly places where people can come together and to discuss contemporary issues around knowledge and information, like this hackathon that took place recently in the Bodleian. But my book, Burning the Books, A History of Knowledge Under Attack, is really a series of reflections on why the preservation of knowledge is so important. And one of the triggers for me writing it was visiting Berlin just a few years ago, and crossing the street from the State Library of Berlin's branch on Unter den Linden. I stumbled upon the location of what was taking place in this photograph. On the 10th of May 1933, an orchestrated book burning of books not just from libraries, but from bookshops and from private collections, books owned by Jews, written by Jews, but also written by others like gays and other members of society that the Nazis regarded as un-German. And Joseph Goebbels on this night encouraged his fellow citizens to condemn the past to the bonfires. And this really heralded the Holocaust. And I'm speaking to you today partly in memory of all those who perished, but also of the knowledge and culture that perished in the Holocaust as well. Another trigger for my book was the revelations that Kellyanne Conway, President Trump's press secretary, released onto the world, that there could be such things as alternate facts, as she and President Trump were being challenged over their claims that more people attended Trump's inauguration than had attended that of Barack Obama. The real trigger for my book, the actual spurt for me getting on and writing it, was in fact the hostile environment triggered by the United Kingdom's Home Office on immigrants to the United Kingdom who were being challenged to prove their right to remain. The same government department, the Home Office, at the same time was destroying records in its own care that those citizens could use to defend their right to remain in the UK. And this struck me as being an absolutely key example of how the preservation of knowledge in the form of archives in this case was absolutely fundamental for the rights of citizens and for the health of society. My book takes us back to the ancient world, where the story begins, first by looking at the libraries of and archives of the ancient Mesopotamian civilizations, but also the great Library of Alexandria, one of the myths of which is that it was destroyed in a great conflagration and that its collections perished in this terrible fire. But this actually, if you look at the scholarship, you look at the ancient writers, turns out to have been not actually the truth. What really happened was that there was a great library, and this was founded by the rulers of Alexandria, the Ptolemaic dynasty, and they attached great state importance to the library and took great pride in it as a symbol of their power and their sophistication. And they attracted scholars like Euclid, here in a manuscript in the Bodleian Library's collection, who used the collections in Alexandria and the contact with other scholars to create fundamentally transformative knowledge like this foundation text of modern mathematics. And we know from the ancient writers that there was a great library, but that by the 4th or 5th centuries of the Christian era, that library had gone, and that it did not take place, that its destruction did not take place on single events, as some of the ancient writers asserted, like the civil war between Ptolemy and Caesar, because other scholars like the geographer Ptolemy accessed the library's collections after that event was meant to have taken place. But the myth of the destruction of Alexandria persists to this day. But the real lesson that we must learn from the destruction of Alexandria is one of neglect. The library ceased to exist because it stopped being patronized by the state, by the rulers of Alexandria. And over centuries, it lost funding, it lost status, and it ceased to exist. And no trace of it now survives other than copies of texts that were once in that library. And the same is true of the ancient library of India in the ancient University of Nalanda. And in the Bodleian, we have one of only 3 books, 3 manuscripts that survive from that ancient collection. And although, again, like Alexandria, scholars disagree over the exact cause of its demise, we know that that by the Middle Ages, the library had ceased to exist. If we fast forward in time to England and the Reformation of the 16th century, we know that libraries like that of the university, which had begun in 1320 in the university church, and were preserved and protected in strong chests like this one, and contained important knowledge like this, given one of the few surviving books from the original collections of the Middle Ages. That those collections, which then grown into rooms like this one here that still exists in the Bodleian, but those books were targeted by the reformers, by the Protestant reformers in the middle of the 16th century. And although this room on the eve of the Reformation had more than 400 books in it, Today, only 11 survive, and only 4 of them are still in Oxford. Part of the reason for its destruction was the religious motivation of Henry VIII, who charged this man, John Leland, with a task to go and survey libraries across the kingdom in order to provide knowledge that would support his claim to divorce himself from Catherine of Aragon and to marry Anne Boleyn, and then to divorce the church in England from the papal authority of Rome. One of the libraries that John Leland visited was on this site. This is Glastonbury in Somerset in the west of England, and where the ancient library of this great, one of the most powerful and richest monastic houses in the nation. And here is the list of books that John Leland saw on his visit in the 1530s. And the bottom entry there, you can see Grammatica Euticis Liber Olim Sancti Dunstani. And here is the actual book that Leland saw on that visit. And one of the few, nearly only 60 of probably 1,500 books in that library collection survived. But it survived because of antiquaries who rescued it from the destruction of the monastery that took place after its formal dissolution in 1539, and is now in the Bodleian Library's collections. And I see that the activities of this man, Sir Thomas Bodley, our refounder, his role was so important because a reaction against the destruction of knowledge in the Reformation and the renewal of the institution now called the Bodleian Library that I'm currently responsible for. But that urge to preserve knowledge that's so crucial to the role of librarians and archivists, we see again in Oxford in the 17th century with John Milton. And Milton had been a great friend of my predecessor, the second librarian. He presented a volume of his own works to the library. But that collection was targeted after the restoration of the monarchy, and where radical writers like Milton were regarded as being illegal, and their books were ordered to be brought together and burned in a great fire. Now, my predecessor, the librarian at the time, hid the treasured volume of Milton's works and refused to give it up to that conflagration. And so that impulse for preservation, even risking your life, is something which we see in librarianship throughout history. One rather shameful episode in the destruction of knowledge that Great Britain was responsible for took place in 1814 in Washington, D.C., where this man, Admiral Cockburn, the leader of a British expeditionary force to the United States, was responsible for. And you can see in the background to this engraving the destruction of Washington that took place in August 1814. And the Capitol building was one of the key targets for that great, that terrible event. And the Library of Congress was situated in the Capitol building. It had around 4,000 volumes at the time, and they were targeted for destruction. They were set aflame, useful combustible material that witnessed an attack on government. And so the destruction of its library was one state fighting another and using its body of knowledge as a weapon of war. One volume survived the attack. It was taken as a prize possession for one of the British expeditionary troops and given to Admiral Cockburn as a souvenir, a spoil, if you like, of the conqueror. But it survived in the family's collection and was represented to the Library of Congress in 1940. But again, the destruction of the library in 1814 prompted another act of renewal. And this time it was the offer of that Congress could buy books at favorable rates from the greatest private collection in America at the time, the Library of Thomas Jefferson, one of the architects of the Revolution, one of the architects of the American Constitution. And if you go to the Library of Congress today, you can see a wonderful exhibit around Thomas Jefferson's library. I'd like us to move forward into the 20th century and to the Holocaust and to the city of Vilna, or modern-day Vilnius, the capital of Lithuania, which on the eve of World War II was one of the great centers of Jewish thought and religious life. It was known as the Jerusalem of Eastern Europe. And it was full of libraries and archives, like the Strashun Library, a public library gifted to the Jewish community in the city, and an absolutely vital place of culture and learning. But there was also an archival institution called YIVO, which attempted to gather together manuscripts and primary sources that documented ordinary Jewish life in Central and Eastern Europe. And YIVO was an absolutely critical part of the renaissance of Jewish life in 20th century Europe. One of the items they collected was even the diary of Theodor Herzl, one of the chief architects of Zionism. But as the Nazis moved east after Operation Barbarossa, they entered Vilna in 1941 and began to sort through the books and documents that they found in their libraries, forcing the Jewish librarians at gunpoint to send unique items back to Germany for Alfred Rosenberg's perverted Research Institute for the Study of the Jewish Question, and all the others were destroyed. This group of librarians, who were called by the Nazis the Paper Brigade, they secretly hid documents in their clothing, smuggled them back into the ghetto, and hid those books, seeking their protection. And one of the members actually survived the murder of that followed the liquidation of the Vilna ghetto, Dina Abramovich, who came to join the branch of YIVO that survived in New York as a librarian. Similar events happened in Warsaw, where documents gathered together in the Warsaw Ghetto were hidden in the hope that they would be uncovered after World War II as a witness to what had happened in that city. And indeed, here you can see documents being uncovered in the 1950s. Some of the books that the Nazis had stolen were discovered by American troops in 1945 and sent back to YIVO's headquarters in New York. But a Lithuanian librarian also found some of the hidden treasures secured by members of the Paper Brigade at risk of their own life. And this man, Antanas Ulpis, hid many of these books and documents in the National Library of Lithuania, which only became known after 1989 and the fall of communism. And many of those documents are now preserved in the YIVO headquarters in New York. I'd like to end by thinking about the current situation that we find ourselves in the world of digital knowledge. And we are in a world where online information is created and shared at record levels, at unbelievable levels, but it's managed by a small number of tech companies, what my colleague in Oxford, Timothy Garton-Ash, calls the private superpowers. And they have increasing dominance over the way that information is shared. And we can see that that knowledge is under attack. It's a danger both of neglect, like the website of the Supreme Court in the United States, which a study in 2011 showed that 40% of the web links were broken and led to nowhere. Or it's under attack because of the activities of players like Cambridge Analytica, who worked with Facebook to harvest online data created by individuals using social media in order to target political advertising in various elections across the world, including the 2016 presidential election and the Brexit elections referendum in the UK. Libraries and archives are stepping up to try and archive this world. In the National Library of New Zealand, they're encouraging New Zealanders to donate their Facebook profiles. We saw just in the last few weeks that the social network Parler has been removed from many web platforms and essentially suppressed. But again, the Internet Archive captured Parler's website before it was taken offline. And we see that the role that the big social media players have is really shifting the balance of power. The big social media players have such power where they can remove Donald Trump's ability to express his opinions online. And there are a range of views as to whether this is a good thing or a bad thing for society. And it's something which we have essentially ceded power to the big tech companies who now wield that authority for good or ill. I'd like to leave us with this quote from George Orwell from 1984, where we see that the ability to erase the past and to rewrite history is taking place in recent weeks. We see that the Trump administration tried to remove documents from the Centers for Disease Control, and that Donald Trump himself has a track record of deleting his own tweets. But again, activist archivists have stepped up to try and preserve that deleted information. I want to leave you with 5 reasons why libraries and archives are so important. They have an absolutely crucial educative role, providing access to knowledge for their communities. They also bring a diversity of knowledge into the places where they work. They bring knowledge which may be difficult for ordinary individuals to acquire. They can bring foreign language materials to any community. And it's that, in a deliberative democracy, it's that diversity of opinion where we can be challenged and we can have silences filled. Libraries and archives also support the rights of citizens, and they encourage integrity and transparency in decision making. And they also provide a fixed reference point for facts and truth, and they enable the reproducibility of science so that we can be sure that decisions and research that's being undertaken on our behalf can be trusted and relied upon. And finally, they allow for communities and society to understand their own identities, both in cultural and historical terms. Libraries and archives have never been more important for our society, and I would like to celebrate their role in working with booksellers and publishers to accumulate the knowledge of the past for the sake of society moving into the future. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Richard, for this insightful presentation and stunning visuals. Ladies and gentlemen, presenting to you the keynote remarks, We Believe in Books, Claudia Kaiser and Juergen in conversation. Juergen trained as a publisher at Herder Verlag in the early 1980s and has held management positions at Drumer Nor Verlag, Karl Hanser Verlag, as well as Springer Science and Business Media and John Wiley and Sons. He became president and CEO of the Frankfurter Bookmies GmbH in 2005 and is president of Litprom and managing director of Litcam. Claudia Kaiser was trained as a bookseller, has an MA in Chinese Studies, and was the editor of the China Foreign Literature Publishing House. In 1998, she set up the German Book Information Center by Frankfurter Bookmies in Beijing and was its first director. She later moved on to the United Nations Publishing in New York and has been in the senior management of the Frankfurt Book Fair since 2003. As Vice President Business Development, Frankfurt Book Fair, she presently looks into the Southeast Asian markets and South Asia and Arab world and Africa. Over to you, Claudia.
Hello and good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are in the world. And dear Namita, William and Sanjoy and all the team at Teamwork and Jaipur BookMark and Jaipur Literature Festival. Thank you so much for staging this amazing event online, so we will not miss it this year. In the past years, Juergen, the president of Frankfurter Buchmesse, and myself had visited your festival in person almost every year. And we have such wonderful memories of the authors, the conversations, the splendid evening events, and the whole atmosphere. And we really hope we can be with you in person, on the ground, in Jaipur next year. But for today, we will make do with a also wonderful virtual event. And so, can I say, welcome to BookMark at Jaipur Literature Festival 2021. Let's get some insights from Juergen, who talks to so many publishers in the world. Juergen, we are in a lockdown in Germany, just like in many other places in the world. COVID-19 turned everything upside down. In your opinion, how did the international publishing community deal with the pandemic?
Thank you, Claudia. Dear friends in Jaipur, dear friends of publishing, dear friends of storytelling worldwide, it's been a very challenging year for everybody, especially also the sector of culture. Culture has been very much challenged. No theaters, no movie theaters, no ballets, no opera, and bookstores had to lock down in quite many places all over the world. And publishing were very scared of what's going to happen. But I think our industry, the world of publishing, has managed quite well. The latest number I've seen from 2020, I think Germany lost like 3%, the United States lost a few percent against 2019. This accounts for many markets. I don't know how it looks like in India. I think India is struggling a lot more than Germany or Europe is struggling. So it will be quite excited to hear your comments on that. But I still do believe that our industry, the world of storytelling, is very resilient. And actually, I think people are bored now of looking into screens all the time. And I was quite surprised, and I really like this idea, when I've seen the latest statistics in Europe showing that we have a lot more younger readers, than we had before the pandemic. And I think this shows what a prominent factor our industry is.
Well, thank you, Juergen. And what kind of impact do you think the pandemic will have on literary writing and publishing?
I think literature is always a mirror. It's mirroring what's happening in society. It's the individual being part of a society. It's an individual struggling with society as well. So I'm sure we are going to see a lot of political books, not only because of the pandemic, but also because of politics is difficult right now. And we are seeing some trends which are there to threaten democracy. So we are going to see this. On the other hand, literature can also be about escapism. If you look into romance, looking into books where you find a safe world, where you find a safe harbor reading these books. So this might be another major trend. And what we're already seeing, as I mentioned before, there are younger people reading, and that we are seeing that young adult and children books is rising. So this is quite important for us in publishing, that we are seeing that our market shares are growing.
Yeah, that's really something, this escapism, no? And the fact that in Germany, as you said earlier, we have we only have a small loss altogether, where other countries have even much more losses, and some countries even gained, like New Zealand, for instance, where the numbers have been rising. The more people are reading, turning to books and reading books. It's quite amazing.
Yeah, I think New Zealand is a very special situation. being an island, yeah, and having locked their borders, yeah, and they're also looked into. I think what I heard from a friend that political books were on a rise, but sports books as well. New Zealanders have always been very fond of being into sports, and now you see this trend in literature as well.
Yeah. Yeah, so writers, as you said, publishers, all parts of the publishing industry come together once a year at the Frankfurt Book Fair in October. But like all other book fairs, the Frankfurt Book Fair 2020 could not take place either, at least not the physical exhibition, even though there was a great program, also physically, and a very neat digital program. Hopefully, from mid-2021, we will be in a better space. What are actually the changes, perhaps also the long-term changes that book fairs have to face? And what does a post-COVID book fair have to achieve, what in your perspective?
Yeah, we haven't seen yet a post-COVID book fair. Yeah? We are still in the middle of the pandemic, so it's quite difficult to tell. Yeah, we were talking to our friends in Taiwan a few weeks ago, and actually they had to cancel their physical book fair like 2 days before the book fair. Yeah, because also Taiwan has a very positive pandemic situation compared to the rest of the world. So there can be changes every minute to what's happening in the world. We've learned how to use digital tools, but we also learned the limitations of these digital tools. Yeah, and as you're sitting there in front of your screen, you have such a huge offering from all over the world, yeah, that it's getting too much. And what book fairs are doing is curating this content, yeah? So you get to see what is important for you. We had a very successful conference program for the publishing industry, and this is something we want to keep. But maybe we're going to move it right before the book fair, not during the book fair, so people have more time actually. So these are things we have to experiment with, and will take us another few years to find out what the successful formats are going to be for our audience. Because we have an audience which is readers, we have an audience which is trade visitors, yeah, we have an audience which is politicians, journalists, so we have many, many different audiences, and we have to adjust our offering to these to the needs of these people. So it's going to be another experiment this year. We'll have to see, probably we have to reinvent some ourselves. You've heard this from myself many, many times. Yeah, every book fair is a new book fair. And this is what we've learned. Actually, we cannot rely that things are going to stay as they are. Our industry is reinventing themselves all the time, finding new market, finding new topics, finding new authors, yeah, reaching out to other media, yeah, finding new formats for storytelling. And this is what you have to expect from a book fair in Frankfurt. That's what you have to expect from Jaipur Book Festival as well.
Yeah, we're looking forward. Hopefully we will get to see it in person next year. But I'm also sure that this will be a real cool addition in the virtual format. Jaipur has already done a lot of virtual events, and they were really very interesting and very innovative topics. What do you personally, or what do you think you personally learned from the COVID-19 crisis? And in your opinion, have any innovative ideas or innovations come up that you would like to point out?
Actually, it's a bit the other way around. Yeah, what I experienced, or my learning, is how important it is to meet people in person. And since I've been traveling like crazy for many years, I think I have to take I have to give myself more time actually seeing people and talking to them. Yeah, and having been locked in behind this screen now for more than a year, yeah, I now know how precious this is to be able to travel and to see people. So this is one learning for me. Take it even more serious. Yeah, if you see people, take your time, listen to these people. I think this is one learning. The other one about the digital is we have these focused meetings back to back. Yeah, but this is something different. Yeah, you lose a lot of creativity, and I think there are no format there actually to strengthen creativity if it's only via digital communication. So we have to think about how to foster, how to strengthen the creativity process. A book fair, a literature festival, it can be very chaotic. Yeah, it can be very stressful for everybody. But this releases also a lot of creativity. So the second important thing is I learned is how important creativity and even chaos can be. And the other thing is, and this is one which speaks for a virtual environment, we can reach out to a lot more people. And it's so easy now. Yeah, in the past, it was a lot more difficult to reach out to people. And now we are used actually to reach out via video. And this actually does help. But again, it's a lot more work than it used to be. But we can reach out to a lot of people. So these are my 3 learnings. The importance of creativity in chaos, the importance of personal meetings, and the strengths of digital communication.
Yeah, I would really second what you're saying. And I heard from a lot of people that they said their business has also, even if it hasn't shrunk, but the business has been concentrated on people they have met in person before, and that not a lot of new business has come out in this time, has appeared in this time of the pandemic, where everybody only meets digitally. So yeah, that's another point of saying, yes, it's very, very important to have those personal meetings, even though I also agree with you that the reach is amazing. The reach these digital conferences have, and how many people you can actually get to that otherwise would never be able to come to Jaipur or to Germany. So that's great.
Yeah, I do believe, Claudia, you're right. Yeah, because what we are going to see, we are only going to see the results of 2020 in 2-3 years' time. Yeah, because we're not getting too many new contacts right now. Yeah, and the lack of creativity also puts some stress on us. Yeah, it might have been a year where we sales-wise, didn't lose as much as we thought we would lose. Yeah, but again, I think we lost a lot of creativity. And also in the field of education, I wonder what's going to happen to these kids, which lost a lot of being with other kids in school. Yeah, this is quite a unique experience. Yeah, and you're going to miss a year of that. True. Homeschooling doesn't replace meeting physically in a school, seeing your teacher, bonding with other people. So I think culture-wise and education-wise, we are going to suffer, and we're only going to see this in 2-3 years' time.
Yes, well, let's wish Bookmark and the Jaipur Literary Festival virtual edition lots of success, a big success, lots of luck, and we look forward to seeing and hearing all your interesting events. Juergen, thank you so much for being here today with us.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you to everybody in Jaipur to enable this. And yeah, we are going to miss you. Have a successful LitFest. All the best.
Yes, we miss you. All the best and lots of creativity. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, Juergen and Claudia, for the keynote remarks. And a big thank you to all for being such a wonderful, attentive audience. All our sessions will be available to view later on our Facebook page and YouTube channel. Once again, we would like to thank all our advisors and partners for generously supporting us. We hope you all enjoyed this conversation and will stay tuned for the upcoming session, European Union Prize for Literature. Writing from across Europe, Anne Bergman, Matthias Norat, Melis Friedenthal and Rodan Al-Ghalidi in conversation with Neeta Gupta. Organized by Cultural Relations Platform, an EU-funded project in collaboration with the Jaipur BookMark. Thank you once again. And now we present an interesting reading from the JBM Shorts series.